Welcome. It's Monday, October 21st. Week 7's almost over. We're almost at the midway point in the 2019 NFL season. Dave Lochran with me, of course, as always, Manny Lara, breaking it down. Change the title of the show so people know exactly what we're doing here. Monday morning quarterback, Manny. Never heard that before, right? And lessons for week 8. Taking a look at everything we've learned from week 7 and applying it to the next one. I want to get something out of the way first. When I was looking through these numbers, I think you find it interesting as well. We've got the screen share up so you guys can follow along with us. That's fantasycruncher.com lineup study. And if you were to go to awesemo.com/join, use the sign-up code NFL Strategy, all one word. And upon doing so, you can get that Fantasy Cruncher add-on straight through us at awesemo.com. It's a win-win and an excellent tool to look at each week, not just for crunching lineups, but to seeing what went right and what went wrong. So I want to jump into something here and get your take on it. You do a lot of this lineup study. So if you're looking at the screen, something that jumped off the page at me immediately was the total exposure, the total ownership. Take all of the players from the lineup and combine it for each one of these top lineups. So the guy who won the Millie Maker had 5 entries. He had 109% total exposure. That's pretty average. It's pretty much in the middle. But then look at this. The next one, 55% total ownership, total exposure. 52% for third place. Man, it's insane. 86%. 95%. So I guess that's semi-normal. Two Gun was at 98%, but all of these guys are under 100. Almost every single one's under 100, except this one and the one up top. So many of these lineups at the top, you have guys that had 5 lineups, 1 lineup, 1 lineup, 1 lineup. You're talking about certain lineups that had 55, 60% total ownership. Looking across this, Rodgers, 2%, Dalvin Cook, 26. That's the only guy he had at high ownership. Henry, 11%. Davis, 1.8. Stefan Diggs, 5. Marvin Jones, 2. Ebron, 0.7. Michael Thomas, 4%. And the Rams at 2%. That was second place in the $10 Millie Maker yesterday.
Yeah, his only lineup too. Crazy how that works.
Yeah.
It's I'd say it's your standard contrarian type player, but it's something I have mixed feelings about.
That
because
whole lineup is contrarian outside of one player.
Extremely. And some may argue that's the way to play these tournaments. Some argue, that may not be it. But either way, it's a lineup that can and has the ability to get, in the top 1% and the top 0.5% of tournaments. And that's how you have to look at it, right? I know some players across the industry that just, solely do contrarian type plays. And, they say when the field fails, you have an easier time getting to the top. And I kind of agree with that. I just haven't found a way to make it happen, accurately for me, to where I'm not forcing, because I also think if you're just going to do exposure sums and do it beforehand on Fantasy Cruncher and say only make lineups that have exposure sum of 50 or less, you're going to get some pretty crappy lineups. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that's the right way to do it either. So it's one of those things where you should be playing like that kind of, but it's not as easy to implement, and that's where I think people go wrong. These guys obviously yesterday implemented it very well, and yeah, some of those guys near the top with just one lineup. There were a few of them, right? The guy in second place, the guy in 5th and 6th, all ran one lineup each, and to play in a Millie Maker of almost 500,000 entries. One entry got you there. That's pretty darn impressive. So yeah, that's probably the route you want to go if you're playing just one entry. Have a bunch of low owned guys, but yeah, they also have to have the upside, and Aaron Rodgers definitely had that yesterday.
Do you really think going in a fashion where you're playing how many players are in the lineup? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You really think having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 9 below 5% is optimal?
I don't think that's optimal, right? But if you're playing, so how it works is, if you're playing cash games where 50% of the tournament or head to head or whatever it is, cash, then you want to be as close to the field as possible, I'd say, and let other people make mistakes, right? When, the top 20% cash, you want to be much more different than the field so you can get there, right? When 10% cash and you're playing like a winner take all or something, you want to be extremely different from the field. When there's 500,000 entries, I think you really need something that stands you up from the field big time and gets you to that top spot, to where if listen, it's obvious that when good plays go off, no matter if they're 20, 30, 40% owned, they're going to get you somewhere, but it's going to be much harder for you to get first, second, third, fourth, fifth than it is when you have a bunch of low owned guys and say the chalk all fails. The problem with this strategy is most people can't wait the month, 2 month, 3 months, 4 months before they hit type of thing, right? And I think there's a lot of misconceptions with it too, saying like, well, if I don't hit, I am so far behind other players. Are you really? Like, I don't know. And you have to think of it over time, right? So this is a strategy where if I pick low owned guys over time, what is my return going to be? And I think that's where you have to look at it, or kind of have to look at it. So I'd say, yeah, the bigger the tournaments, and obviously this is the biggest one, you want to get as different as possible. I think these guys are doing it right. I still haven't figured out how to perfect this per se, but I think being different is probably the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are certain things that happen week to week where, you throw your hands up and you say, "Wow." Like Michael Thomas having a big game is not surprising because he catches everything that's thrown his way. But somebody like Latavius Murray on Yahoo, where he was $12, and you'd want to have him almost everywhere.
Sure.
On DraftKings, where that price was up. Now, people looking in hindsight are going to be like, "Of course you play Murray on DraftKings. Why would you not?" All right, fine, that's fine. But where he's more expensive than a lot of running backs that were in better spots than him, I don't think Murray's a bad running back at all. Actually, he's probably arguably the best backup in the league. But I think there's also something to be said here about what has happened to the Chicago Bears defense.
Yep. And we talked about it yesterday on Sirius. It's when your offense is that bad and you're forced to be on the field for that long, just over and over and over again, eventually you're going to give in no matter how good you are, right? And I'd say it was just they couldn't stay off the field at all. It was pretty much 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out from that Chicago offense, to the point where you might as well, the defense might as well just stay out on the field. Like, they couldn't do anything, and it was an awful performance all around from the team. Teddy Bridgewater improves to, I think it was 5-0 or 6-0, whatever it is. He didn't lose while he was out. Drew Brees coming back next week, and it's one of those where it didn't even really matter who they were playing. I think Chicago was just destined to lose that game. They didn't look good at all. They were at home. They had everything going for them and still couldn't perform. So it's an offense to where, we talked about it yesterday, this might be, Miami bad offense. And that's that's not a hot take. Like, they are that bad. Outside of that Redskins game, you said it, they've been horrendous, league worst. So I don't know. I'd attribute it as a team. They've just been awful.
It's amazing to me. Here's what they allowed per game through the first 4 games against or on the ground: 47 yards to Green Bay, and they do not have a bad rushing attack.
Sure.
90 to Denver, 69 to Washington, and 40 to Dalvin Cook's Vikings. Here's what they've allowed on the ground over the last 2 weeks: 169 to Josh Jacobs in Oakland, and 151 to Latavius Murray and the Saints. That is a huge, huge difference from what we saw earlier and what we saw over the past 2 weeks. And you know what? When you're looking at injuries, when, like you said, the offense can't stay on the field, puts the defense on the field, there's a point where you have to start making adjustments.
Yeah, and you have to wonder. We talked about the and it's funny because sometimes we have to talk season long in on Sirius, and it's like, do we drop Cohen? Do we drop Montgomery? I mean, drop whoever you want. They're not giving you anything, right? I even said, you might as well even, I mean, try to keep Cohen maybe because of the PPR points. Montgomery doesn't give you anything. The receivers outside of Allen Robinson, all garbage, nowhere near even wide receiver 2 territory on this team. They don't have a tight end, really. Like, it's the quarterback play has been subpar is an understatement. Like they've been garbage in every single position. I mean, it's brutal, man. Like this team needs a major overhaul. Obviously not defensively, but offensively, man, that's one tough team to watch.
The last time the Bears allowed back-to-back 100-yard rushers was in 2015 when Ronnie Hillman did it and then Eddie Lacy did it.
Two of the most unlikely guys.
Yeah. I mean, the Saints had the ball for 38 minutes. It was like you said, when you're on the field that much, it's really going to hurt. And the Bears run game is just, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible, man. Montgomery's been a disaster. So look, you have to start making adjustments. If you look at a spot like this, and I think we obviously have to go back and look at more. The Bears aren't getting takeaways. Their pass rush hasn't looked as good. They've lost back-to-back games in ugly fashion. We need to look at this, but the adjustments are so important at this time of year. And like I said, on Yahoo, I really liked Murray. On DraftKings, I didn't. Will I make adjustments going forward against the Bears defense? You look into this a little bit more. You look at their run game, or you look at their run defense, and you look at how bad their offense has been. Yeah, it's very possible. But these two last games have been very telling. I want to go to Tom JK 321. That is Thomas Kennedy, or Tom Kennedy, co-founder, CEO of Awesemo.com. I'm going to show you something crazy, right? So he had a lineup that came in 13th place in the $10 Millie Maker, right? Check this lineup out. And Tom's a really good player, too. One of the top ranked players.
Very good player.
There is. So Stafford at 1.8, Cook at 25. Now, mind you, his total ownership was 152, which is pretty crazy. That's very high. But a lot of them were high, and he had some pretty solid scores. Matt Stafford at 1.8, Dalvin Cook at 25.9, Fournette at 48.5. He had 99.3% Fournette, by the way. Danny Amendola, 0.3. T.Y. Hilton, 35. Marvin Jones, 2.3. Waller at 10. Henry at 11. And the Bills at 17. Now, the point I'm trying to make, Tom's a very good player. And when you see a lineup like this, you say, okay, I get the sense in that. He went with a lot of chalky plays that were in really good spots. Like Fournette, phenomenal spot. Was he bad? No. Was he great? No. But the 20 on a slate like that's not going to kill you, obviously. Dalvin Cook was really good in a very favorable spot. And then Hilton was chalk as well, 35%. He had a solid game. Darren Waller, not as chalky as I thought he'd be, but he had a huge game. Also wasn't unowned either. I mean, 11% is significant. Henry at 11%. I liked Henry a lot. He got that touchdown late in the game, had solid enough numbers. And then, of course, the Bills' defense. But what you saw, Manny, is three players here. Matt Stafford, Danny Amendola, and Marvin Jones. Virtually unowned. Combined ownership of less than 5%. And that was what got him, a top 15 showing in the Millie Maker. It wasn't Fournette. It wasn't Cook. It wasn't Hilton. Waller, of course, was one of them, but it wasn't Derrick Henry and it wasn't the Bills.
Yeah, no, and incredible. I think going for, and by the way, I'd even throw this out there for whoever that's watching and still hasn't read that Awesemo article about him sharing, how he came up or whatever, how he started, what profit and loss looks like, and things that he's taken away as a player. Go read that. Extremely insightful. I read it and I took a lot from it. And it reminds me of kind of a part in there where it says it's not about just really picking low-owned players, but more having unique lineups. And he goes into not just exposure sums, but, the product of exposures. And this is one of those cases to where you see the exposure sum being 150, but it's still a really unique lineup, right? And if that's what you're going to aim for, that's still a very good idea. I mean, I don't know, 1% Stafford to me is nuts, right? Even pairing him with Amendola is even worse. But 20, I mean, it's literally you want to stand out from the crowd. You still have upside because you're stacking, and that's really what you want, right? If you have a game stack in there too, Dalvin Cook. I mean, it's a perfectly constructed lineup, right? You obviously had the Marvin Jones blow up game, and I think it's a great lineup. I think it's a phenomenal lineup. People might see what's a 152 exposure sum. Exposure sum at times can be misleading, only because I could have a player having, could be 90% owned maybe coming into the slate, and then I play someone with him that's 1% owned. But if you add them together, I mean, it's not going to give you a good indication of how different the lineup is because of how skewed that is, right? So for me, it's try having unique lineups. Maybe using the product sometimes is a little bit better. This is one of those where if you were using that, the combination of Jones, Amendola, and Stafford really got you there. So yeah, very, very nice lineup.
Yep, for sure. And Timothy in YouTube chat, by the way, will happily reference your comments if they're solid or if we think we can riff off of them. He says the ownership was skewed by Fournette. I guess he means in this lineup, but it really isn't skewed by Fournette. And here's what I mean. Dalvin Cook was 26%. Fournette was 48.5%. So obviously that's very high. But Manny, T.Y. Hilton was 35% as well. Like, he had 3 of the highest owned players on the slate in this lineup.
Yep. It's and I'm telling you, you want to go for uniqueness, and uniqueness doesn't always mean exposure sum. So yeah, all you need is a few pieces, right? If you can get 3, 4, 5 pieces that, or I don't know, whatever it is that are extremely different. Doesn't have to be 1%, right? You don't have to go for the 1% or 0.5% on a dollar. Right. You don't have to do that. But if you can just, take into account that that's what you're aiming for, and then make lineups accordingly, dude, you'll have good turnouts, and that's exactly what happened for Tom. Yeah.
Show you something pretty crazy too.
Sure.
Matthew Stafford, 1 of 150 lineups.
Who was that for?
For Tom.
Oh my goodness.
He had 1 Matthew Stafford lineup, right? And look, I'm not saying this won the Millie, but it was it wasn't far off.
Right.
Danny Amendola, 3 of 150. Marvin Jones, 3 of 150 lineups. So it's pretty crazy there. And that's this is the one thing why I think having a core is really important. This is what happens when you have 69% Darren Waller, right? So he had a ton of Darren Waller. This is what happens when you have, 100% Fournette. And again, I'm not even saying that Fournette was a stud here, but he really didn't hurt you. But he had 25% Dalvin Cook, and spots like that where if your core happens to go off, or at least just be very solid enough, then you're giving yourself a shot with those 1% lineups that you're running with Stafford and Marvin Jones. What I'm saying really is, when you don't have really any core and you're so spread out, you might have an Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Marquez Valdez-Scantling lineup, but none of your core players, that Tom had that went off would really be in those lineups, and you're just completely throwing darts hoping that you hit on one of them. So he stuck with a really tight core on a few players, and it allowed him to get some of the lower owned guys in with an opportunity to open things up. And that's what happened with this lineup.
Yeah, for sure. It's always fascinating when we can go back and look at something like this and check out all the mind games, right? All the ownership game that goes on in a tournament, and how people try to play the field, right? I've been studying, not really trying to model tournaments beforehand and how to play against them, but just really digging into ownership and kind of really how it works to the core, man. And seeing something like this is perfect. I've seen people where they research a ton and have come with a conclusion of, if only you can be 10% different than the field, that can go a long, long way. You don't have to be drastically different to the point where I'm going to make a lineup full of 1%ers. Well, that's that in my opinion, that'd be kind of dumb too, right? But if you could just be even 10% different from day to day, week to week, depending on the sport, I think that could go a really long way. And listen, all it takes is one. I say it all the time, right? All it takes is one. And in Tom's case, yeah, that was the Stafford lineup yesterday.
That's right, man. That is right. By the way, someone said, where is it? Steve Bono said, why would people play Fuller against Indy on the road? People, come on, man. Manny's greatest advice, play good players. Fuller isn't Hopkins on the road. Look, I wasn't even big on Fuller, but the guy got hurt in the first quarter.
Yeah, you can't say that. He got an injury. I mean, that would be foolish to say, why'd you play Fuller? You didn't know he was going to get injured? I mean, what?
Yeah, he literally got injured. He had one target, which he caught. So I don't know. That target came like 22 seconds into 32 seconds into the game. Will Fuller's definitely dealt with some injuries, no question. But I mean, come on now, that wasn't that's not something that you can look at and make no declarations based on that. Manny, do you want to check out? You have some interesting stuff. You want to check out the big Millie Maker, the $3,000 entry Millie Maker?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I talked about this on my podcast yesterday, and this one's pretty cool. So I'll give you guys like a rundown of how this one turned around, right? In 2015, the last millionaire of that season, a user by the name of Two Gun, won his first millionaire, right? And I think that was the first season, if not the second season, they started running the Millionaire Maker series. Two Gun ended up winning it the last week they held it that season, right? 2 years later, in 2017, week 14, Two Gun joined what I think is pretty elite company. I think he was the third person ever to win double Millionaire Makers, right? And some won it in other sports. I think one was baseball. I know the duo of Ray of Hope did it, one on DK, one on FanDuel, and I think one was through a live final. So he had joined pretty elite company, winning two. Yesterday, Two Gun in the $3,000 Millie Maker ended up winning his third Millionaire Maker ever. And
he had 4 lineups. Some people maxed this.
Right. He had 4 lineups, I think, on the entire site. So it wasn't even, you saw he almost took down the $10 one.
I saw that. Yep.
Right. So it was that same lineup. And to me, it's something that it's 3 Millionaire Makers, but like winning 1, I think, is near impossible. Winning 2, I mean, you are the stud of the studs. Winning 3, brother, I mean, is there anyone that will ever, I don't know, right? I don't think anyone will ever get to that mark again, right? Obviously, the other 2 that have Millionaire Makers have a chance, but that's pretty impressive on its own. I think I might be missing one. I think either Chess is Okay, Cubs fan, or Chipotle probably have 2. I could be wrong there, but no one has 3. I can guarantee you that. I've never seen 3. I've never heard of 3. That's bizarre. How he did that. I mean, credit where credit's due, man. A very, very good player took down his third millionaire.
And it's funny. There's a lot of people that, of course, are going to be like, "Well, yeah, but it was a $3,000 entry. There were only 1,100 total people." Look, you're right about that, but what about the fact that lineup came in 6th in the $10 Millie Maker that had 411,000 people?
Yeah.
Right?
And he did it. That was also 4 entries. He didn't 150 that.
Yeah, I know. So 4 entries.
That's nuts, man. Insane. Dude.
Here, take a look. Total exposure 106, or what do you call it? Exposure sum. Ownership sum. 2% for Rodgers. I mean, that was the key piece, really. That was the key.
For sure. You needed Rodgers.
Yeah. All of the other lineups were, okay. Like he placed 1, and then 2 of them didn't cash. But Aaron Rodgers, 2%, Dalvin Cook at 21%. Mind you, the exposures will look a little bit different here. He faded Leonard Fournette in this lineup, Manny. So he faded Fournette, but he went with Dalvin Cook. He went with Josh Jacobs. I love the DeAndre Hopkins play there a lot. And then Geronimo Allison only had 7 fantasy points. Mm-hmm. Valdez-Scantling had 24. Darren Waller had 34. Latavius Murray 35. And the Saints defense with 10. I like that Saints defense call quite a bit with how bad the Bears have been. He played 4 lineups. He went with 4 different quarterbacks, okay? 4 different quarterbacks. And like you said, he did the same thing in the other Millie Maker. So went with 4 different lineups. Ryan Tannehill. Imagine you're playing a $3,000 entry and you play Ryan Tannehill. The ball's on this fella.
He almost had 300 yards, dude.
Yes, he almost did have 3,000 yards or 300 yards. But yeah, I mean, some of these lineups are pretty crazy. The running back, 2 Latavius Murray, 2 Melvin Gordon. So, I mean, Melvin Gordon was a disappointment, and he still cashed with 1 of those. Todd Gurley, 1 Fournette, 1 Dalvin Cook, 1 Carson, 1 Barkley. So he had 8 different running backs in 4 lineups. He had 9, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 receivers in 4 lineups. Hopkins he had in 3 of 4. You have to like that. Keenan Allen in 2 of 4. I liked Allen a lot. He got off to a great start and then disappointed. Corey Davis in 2 of these. and I don't think either of those cashed. No, none of those cashed.
Right.
But then Julio Jones, Allison, Westbrook, Tate, Valdez Scantling, AJ Brown, and then 2 Darren Waller, and then defense. He went 4 different defenses. So, man, he definitely said, you know what? I got 4 lineups. Manny, he basically spread them out almost entirely outside of playing 2 Latavius Murray and I guess 2 Darren Waller.
Yeah, it's exactly what you should be doing, right? I don't think you put all your eggs in one basket, especially not with that much money. I think you put the same 4 lineups in every single tournament. So it wasn't just these $3,000 entries that he had riding on these 4 lineups. So yeah, by default, I think you have to differentiate. I've gone over this to where if you're playing a limited amount of lineups, anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe even 10, you kind of want to differentiate as much as possible, right? If you have as much risk tolerance as anyone and you're okay being extremely risky and dealing with huge swings, then yeah, you put all your eggs in one basket, just full YOLO. But I think the right way to do it is kind of differentiate a little bit, right? If you have a good hunch on a couple guys you want to play quite a bit, then yeah, sure, just let it ride there. But I think you go with different stacks, you get exposures to different games. Again, it's a very volatile sport, right? Anytime you have an 11-on-11 sport, it's very random sometimes. So get a piece of everyone, and hopefully the ball falls your way. In his case, man, what would you do with 3 millionaires? Like I wouldn't. I mean, not just one, not just 2. You have 3, and you do them in different years. It's like you're averaging $1 million per year, dude. That's insane.
It's crazy. Chris Klossner said someone played Mariota in the $3,000 milli.
They did. They did.
Higher stakes doesn't always mean smarter, Manny.
It's like you make your lineups like when would that doesn't even make sense because we knew Mariota wasn't starting from a while ago already.
Right.
I don't even know.
Well, let's have some fun with something. You want to see what the lowest score in the 3K milli looked like? Let's take a look. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Is it the Mariota lineup?
No.
That's how.
It was a David Johnson lineup, though.
Okay,
it was a Devonta Freeman lineup. Okay, so I'll give you a pass on that. I still think we'll get into Cliff Kingsbury in a moment. So
That's
Kyler Murray, David
fraud.
Johnson, Devonta Freeman, Brandon Cooks, DK Metcalf. This actually is not a terrible lineup. I mean, maybe you could argue that Mac wasn't a great play or Metcalf or Johnson with the injury, but none of these are just outright insane, Manny. I don't think anything's just downright outrageous outside of the fact that you paired a quarterback with a running back without a wide receiver. Although David Johnson really has been their best pass catcher, really. So I don't know. I guess it's not crazy.
No, it's not horrible. You played good plays. What do you do with the DJ news? I mean, none of us knew that. You fell for it, right? The Devonta Freeman nonsense, like only I mean, I don't even want to insult the guy, but like what kind of little dude is gonna try fighting the biggest, baddest guy in the NFL? Like, what is your problem, dude? Like, he got lifted off the ground. The funniest thing I've ever seen.
Amazing,
like, I don't know
right?
Who was crying. What a bobo, really. And then everyone else just kind of had bad games, right? Golden Tate was in a game where they didn't really do much offensively. DK Metcalf had probably his worst game as a Seahawk so far, fumbling on his own. Like, it was, man, I mean, listen, we've all been there before, right? We've all been there before where not one play in your lineup even goes in the right direction. That was that play. That was that yesterday, friend.
These bottom lineups, I've gotten through 4 of them already. All these bottom lineups either had Kyler Murray, David Johnson, Fitzgerald, Kyler Murray, Fitzgerald. That was a real that was a killer. Because Chase Edmonds, who nobody's playing, look, another Kyler Murray, Fitzgerald lineup. These are all the bottom lineups. Matt Ryan, of course, Devonta Freeman. So I think with a lot of these, you can understand why people would have struggled, right? But with Kyler Murray, the worst part about it was that David Johnson didn't play, and it was Chase Edmonds who did all the work. All 3 touchdowns were 20+ yards. I mean, that's just an absolute dagger.
Yeah, we couldn't project that. Let's talk about this team for a little bit. Like, here's my thing. Apart from the news, right? We'll get to the news in a second. Like, what is it really about this team that everyone loves? They are chalk seemingly every week, right? They're always in what we call the high pace games, but like I think that's already factored in, really. Like they don't spread, they don't stretch the field. Kyler Murray, I feel like is afraid to throw even 10 yards. I feel like Kingsbury's afraid to let him throw 10 yards. They run so fast that they're like, I feel like, yo, we need to run our play so fast. Here, just run this type of thing. Like, I don't, like their play call is mediocre. It feels like it's such a bad fantasy team. Like everything about this team is a fraud, man. Everything. Yesterday, the whole DJ thing, I think, really was the last straw for a lot of us with this team. Like, have you won any money playing these guys? I have not. Not 1 week.
I don't think so. No, I mean,
what do they? There hasn't been one of those weeks for Fitz where he has 25 or 30. Never.
The thing, yeah, dude. Honestly, so disappointed in that.
It's horrible.
This matchup against Grant Haley for Fitzgerald was like literally as good as it gets in the slot. Right. You actually couldn't get a better matchup for Larry Fitzgerald. Right. And he had one reception for 12 yards. It's really incredible, man. It was really. Really incredible.
I saw at one point in the beginning of the game, they had 11 plays, 49 yards. How? Do you know what any other team with 11 plays, how far down the field they would be by now?
I know.
Like, I don't know how you can run 11 plays and only have 49 yards. It's bizarre. It's crazy.
It was really, really rough, man. It was really rough. And you had mentioned something about not really, like, when it comes to matchups,
right?
I don't at all want to say that like matchups don't matter, but to some extent they're overblown, right? I mean, we were all worried about Tyler Lockett against Marlon Humphrey. Marlon Humphrey, by the way, who had that fumble recovery for a touchdown. He's a phenomenal player. But Lockett still finished with 5 for 61 and a touchdown. There are a lot of things here where you look at it and you say, hey, greatest matchup on paper, like Larry Fitzgerald. You really could not have drawn up a better matchup. You knew this. Absolutely nothing. The way the game went, nothing. Zero. Tyler Lockett was still fine. Was he great? No. But he certainly wasn't held to nothing. I'm not ever going to go as far to say that matchups in football don't matter. But you've seen a lot of it this season where the greatest possible spots give you the greatest possible failure, and the toughest possible spots end up killing you because you faded them.
Yeah, no, it's in that same game, the best tight end spot in the world.
Yes.
Arguably, regardless of even matchup, this guy is top 3 tight end in the league, 1 catch, 6 yards. Like, you can't make it up, dude. Like, I don't, some of these things, and we talked about it yesterday. There's so many aspects to even just one play in football, right? There's obviously offensive and defensive schemes. It's an 11 versus on 11 game. To think we know exactly what's going to happen, it's just so tough to do that, right? And it's one of those to where, listen, I can tell you Evan Ingram has the best matchup on planet Earth. If the Giants don't want to pass to him, that I can't know that. I mean, that if they're not going to use him in their game plan, how would I know that? All we can do is, I know the probabilities of him having a good game because every other tight end has had a good game, and these guys just refuse to pass to him. It's not my fault. Same thing with Larry Fitz. Like, if the team is just fixed on passing 5 yards or less every single down, what am I supposed to do? I can't tell you, yo, like, this guy is the league worst in every single category. Attack him. If the team doesn't want to, they don't want, like, I don't know, man. It's one of those things to where I'm starting to believe really matchups don't matter. Because, and think about this for a second. We can't be the only ones that know how good a matchup is, right? Everyone else does too, right? It's just, it comes down to, all right, well, we're playing just a numbers game now. If everyone knows that's the best matchup and people are going to go there, let me just go the other way for no reason. I'm starting to buy into this no reason philosophy. Like, I don't need to give you a reason to fade. Really, I don't. Because if matchups are not going to matter like that, I mean, okay, I'll just go with always the lower owned guy. Like, I don't even care if it's a good matchup or not. The whole Julio Ramsey thing, it doesn't matter. I don't care. It's Julio. If you guys don't want to play him, great. Matchups to me, I don't know. It's really tough, man. It's really tough.
It really is. It is. But hey, Winning is easier on Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor, of course, of the NFL Strategy Show. This is another week where they're going to be running the 250K NFL Baller, $10 entry, $25,000 to first. And basketball's on the way. Some big contests to start the season. The 50K Baller, the 20K Baller, 3K to first, $15 entry. One of these kicking off tomorrow or tipping off tomorrow. The 50K Ballers on Wednesday. They're going to have a lot of great contests coming up. And you can get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points simply by signing up with us at awesemo.com. Very easy way to do this. If you go to awesemo.com, you'll go to the NFL tab. And we will also put the link in the YouTube chat as well. But we can't do it for Yahoo because the terms of service at Yahoo. But if you simply go to NFL, as you can see on the screen here, NFL, and then click on articles, you'll see the primetime showdown slate. If you want to click on this one, you can. All of the primetime articles have the link. And as you can see right here, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Click that link and use the promo code AWESEMO when you sign up. Be eligible for $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points, which are as good as cash to be played on the site. Get those YSRPs for the start of this basketball season. Get in that $250,000 baller. That's Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the NFL Strategy Show. Okay, Manny, you ready for the perfect lineup this week? We discussed it on Awesemo Radio yesterday, and it's outrageous.
It's ridiculous. Some of these guys, man, I would have never thought they'd be in a perfect lineup, and here we are.
Okay, so here is let me pull it up. For Yahoo, Aaron Rodgers, Dalvin Cook, Chase Edmonds, Marvin Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, Zach Pascal, Darren Waller, Latavius Murray, and the Rams. What about DraftKings, you may ask? With DraftKings, you add Edmonds, Pascal, Marvin Jones again. Latavius Murray with 35. Look, some of these reasonable, understandable, but DeAndre Hopkins, good play. Aaron Rodgers, totally get the going off the board there. He's a good quarterback, even though I thought half of his wide receivers were down and out. Right. Chase Edmonds, the backup, with 38. Zach Pascal with 31. Marvin Jones with 4 receiving touchdowns, all four of Matthew Stafford's receiving touchdowns against a stout Minnesota defense. 43.3 DraftKings points. Pretty wild day. And of course, the Rams defense in a game that had a 54.5 total. Now, I actually had no problem with the Rams at that price, just because turnovers are Matt Ryan's thing. And, you return one for a touchdown. It makes all the difference. And it doesn't matter what type of points you allow. Well, they didn't allow any points either, Manny. It's a pretty wild lineup. 309 total points, 48,400 total salary cap. What was it yesterday before it last updated, if you remember? There was another guy.
288. It was Erickson was in there.
Alex Erickson. You're right. Mm-hmm. Alex Erickson was in there. And I guess he was replaced by Latavius Murray. Chase Edmonds was at the RB spot. Correct. And Erickson was in the flex.
Yep. That's what it was. We named it the perfect backup yesterday. Still works, right? Latavius Murray, the backup. Zach Pascal in the beginning of the season was playing 30 to 40% of snaps. Chase Edmonds, obviously a backup too. Alex Erickson is third string in Cincy. I guess, bro. Like, listen, some of these are just not meant to be played. We're not saying this so you guys can go ahead and try to make this next week. I guarantee you'll lose everything you have. But it's always fun to see which players performed and where the scores could have gotten up to. So yeah, pretty impressive. If you were on these guys and you were a little bit different, you were willing to be unique in tournaments this week, then I'd say you had a pretty good week.
Zach Pascal, man. There was a point in the Bengals game where Andy Dalton had 6 completions for 110 yards and Alex Erickson had 6 receptions for 110 yards.
How do you make this up, man? That's just football, dude, right? Like, is there even an explanation for that? Like, the guy hadn't had more than one completion from week 2 to like week 5. One completion. Forget 2 or 3. He didn't have more than one in that span.
I know.
Here we are talking about 100-yard game from this cat.
It's
football, man. Football, dude.
It's truly outrageous. But here it is. I mean, and what's interesting too about DraftKings now is that with some of the pricing at defense, 15,000 is minimum salary now. So it allows you to play a lot of these cheaper defenses and just say, screw it.
Yeah, you could take a risk. And if they happen to get a, defensive score down there, I mean, you'll be golden. You'll be so golden. A 1.5K defense with a touchdown. A lot of things, by the way, happened defensively yesterday. The Bills, and someone just mentioned it in chat, the Bills, that one was with a minute. I had mentioned 10 or so seconds. That was the Rams yesterday who scored with 10 seconds left in the game in a game that wasn't even close. The Bills also scored an onside kick. They just caught the ball and ran it into the end zone.
Yeah.
Miami's so bad, dude. I can't even. I was watching it. I was like, what just happened? He was untouched. He leaped up, caught the ball, and just went into the touchdown.
Well, take a look at some of these, right? Yeah. Chiefs was Thursday Night Football, so we're not going to talk about that. But the Rams facing Atlanta had 21 fantasy points. They were the best on the day. The Baltimore Ravens against Russell Wilson in Seattle, the second highest fantasy points, 2,200. The Jaguars against Cincinnati, like that's not surprising. Cowboys, 49ers, 15. That game was a slip and slide, an actual slip and slide. It was amazing. Players were sliding on their stomachs, trying to chase down quarterbacks by sliding with their hands out. Insane. They held the Washington Redskins to 0 points. That's an exception, though, where a team only produces based on not allowing scoring, right? Like turnover-prone guys on the other side and just bad overall offenses help. But, when you just hold a team to 0 points, you're going to have good results. But the problem is it's very difficult to ever predict that a team's going to hold them to, 6 points or 0 points unless you're dealing apparently with the Patriots this year. And if you're a Buffalo playing Miami, then it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, the randomness in defenses, I can't stress that enough, right? We talk about it all the time where I do this thing where I kind of show my exposures on Sundays, and every time I get to defense, I just say, listen, this is so up in the air. All I can recommend is just be all over the place with your defense and just try to have a few lineups with the complete nuts at defense, right? Because sometimes there'll be a team that scores 40 or 37 or 35. Some weeks the highest scoring will be 20, which is how I think it should be. I hope everyone stays around 20 most weeks, but it's not always the defense you think it will be, right? It's not always the cheapest defense, and we can't predict touchdowns for offensive players. What makes us think we're going to predict touchdowns for defensive players, right? Like way worse. So for me, it's just try to differentiate. Always plug them in last if you can, and if they fit, they fit, and just hopefully you get touchdowns that way. But it's such a tough position, man. It skews up so many things when they have big nights that I don't know. I'm getting kind of frustrated with this whole defensive thing.
Yeah, we're going to get to the top producers in a second, but look at this. Free agent running back Jay Ajayi, according to Adam Schefter, is working out for the Cardinals on Tuesday. So is Spencer Ware. Should we be worried about David Johnson is the question.
Of course. But like, why can't you tell me this before the week, Yeah. Like, if it's not even, he's active. Now we're thinking of signing a new running back altogether. Like, we need help in the backfield. Like, if it really wasn't that close, why did you just troll all of us? You know what I mean? Like, why was he active to begin with? Why?
Right.
I
mean, yeah, with the amount of money that fantasy football brings to the NFL, I mean, really think about it, right? Go on a quick rant here.
Sure.
And I'm honestly, I bitch about a lot of stuff. I'm usually not the type of guy that you see it on Twitter where people are losing their shit over, like in basketball, he was a late scratch or the lineup came out too late or stuff like this. To some extent, I understand why things like that can happen. But you have a lot of these games where You can't tell me tonight that anyone outside of Patriots and Jets fans that isn't playing fantasy football is going to have any interest in that game whatsoever, right?
No, man, come on.
Or
No,
like
not one person.
yesterday's game after halftime. Who cares about that? Or the Chiefs Broncos game without Patrick Mahomes that was already a blowout. These games have been terrible. I mean, you're watching it because of fantasy. I don't know if it's that difficult, and I guess you're trying to gain a competitive edge, or whatnot. But Cliff Kingsbury said it, and I read this yesterday during Awesemo Radio on Sirius XM. I mentioned this to you and quoted Cliff Kingsbury saying, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have it pulled up, basically like, we didn't plan to use him at all unless we had to. And he said that after the game.
For emergency. What emergency are you going to have in a football game? Get out of here, guy. Like, I mean, you weren't going to play him ever. That just tells me you were never going to play the guy. That's come on, man. Like, I love the transparency, and I get it. They don't care about our fantasy teams. I understand. Exactly. But like, then I mean, fantasy, believe it or not, does a lot for viewership, like a ton. And it's true, man. A bunch of people would not watch any sport, really. Like, are you kidding? Baseball would be half dead, really, if fantasy didn't exist. I firmly believe that you cannot in 2019. Listen, for all the people that are watching that are on Tinder, go invite a girl that does not play fantasy to a baseball game and see how fast she'll never talk to you, dude. It's boring. People don't care. People just do not care.
Yep.
Now, if you tell her, I don't know, if this team wins or if this guy gets a base hit, you win $5,000 right now. Dude, she will be way more excited about the at-bat than you will. I mean, it's only logical. It's only logical. I mean, it's so to think, oh, this doesn't matter? Come on, man. Of course it matters.
I know. Interesting comment from where is he? Where are you at, fella? I thought it was Chris Klausner. Yeah, he said, and I'm just switching over for a second. He said, just wait. Everyone thinks NBA is cured of this coach speak stuff with lineups being out 30 minutes before lock, meaning like it's not going to fix anything. So I actually tweeted about this in August when they had talked about the NBA exploring the possibility of moving the deadline announcement for starting lineups earlier before games. And what I tweeted was, it makes you wonder if this would just lead to an increased amount of scratches shortly before the game. I guarantee you're going to see that.
Can you still scratch, like, I don't know, like, oh, he went through whatever, well, like, right at the line. Oh, he can't play. Sorry.
The thing is, like, what are you going to tell him? Like, if you say, hey, he went through shoot around and then he went through warm-ups. But something happened. Like, what are you supposed to say? No, it didn't. How do you prove?
Correct.
How do you prove that they're making it up? So
yeah.
It feels like you're going to have more scratches right before the game, or ruled out, or more late scratches. I'm not convinced at all that guys like Greg Popovich are just going to fall at line and be lockstep with the rest of the league. I'm sure some teams are going to report as they should, but I am not even remotely convinced that it's going to make a big difference in terms of us knowing exactly. Like, yes, the lineups will be out earlier, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to see scratches. I'll believe it when I see it.
What about the? You have to say he's active or whatever, and maybe you can't scratch. So like tip off, intentional foul, come out of the game.
Exactly. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like as soon as the tip off goes off, just grab the other person and go to the bench.
Or he starts and plays 30 seconds. Yeah, like
whatever.
And you might ask, like, what's the incentive for doing that? Right.
You go up to lock, you test your ankle, whatever pregame. If you think you can play, great. If you can't, I couldn't tell you 30 minutes ago, but now 30 seconds until the game. Coach, I really don't want to put it at risk. All right. Well, listen, we already put you active. Get in there, intentional foul, and you're out. Or just don't. You're not. Or whatever it is.
Or just pull him at a whistle. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Ridiculous. Hey, by the way, Jacoby Brissett has thrown more touchdowns through 6 games this year than he did in all of 2017 through 16 games. Tell me Frank Reich isn't a genius.
He's good, man. I saw your tweet yesterday. You definitely miss him in Philly, too.
Big time.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Oh, yeah.
Listen up, fellas. Doug Peterson's a fraud. Oh, that's going to piss people off.
Should
That's going to piss
this,
people off.
Homer.
Think about it, right? 2017, you know who their deep threat was?
Who's that?
Torrey Smith.
All right. You're
All
right.
right. Who was their number one? Alshon Jeffrey. Who was their number two? Nelson Aguilar, which, by the way, him not attempting to catch that ball, downright travesty. The running backs were LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi, and Halapulavati Vaitai was the left tackle because Jason Peters was hurt. Tell me what's different other than Frank Reich and DeFilippo not being there anymore.
Yeah, coaches matter, dude. Coaches matter big time in this sport. I think the sport where coaching matters the most is football for me, and I don't even think it's particularly close. Yeah, man, that game yesterday, I can't imagine you just half watching your screen. Like, that was brutal, dude. Everything about it was just like, man, cringe.
Oh, I know.
And it's a team that's supposed to be or was favorites coming into the year to, win this division by a landslide. I don't know, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. Mike Campbell says, come on, Laffy. People will gamble on the spread in total, not just fantasy. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But are you telling me that their stake isn't affected by David Johnson not playing? Like, okay, yesterday it wasn't because Chase Edmonds was great. But the general concept, Manny, if you're a gambler, if you're a sports bettor and you have action on that game, like you're expecting, and look, some of them obviously may have gone into it thinking he wasn't going to play. Besides the point, like he was active, except he didn't play. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no. So action on a sport is better said, right?
Correct.
As long as you have action on it, whatever the action is. Because we play fantasy, but if you gamble, if you're a sports gambler, whether that's whatever it is, or props or whatever it is that you have on the game going, sure, then you have some incentive to watch. But we live in a world where it's all about instant gratification, right? That's the reason we're all in love with social media. That's the reason we all love food. It's the reason we all love all these things. It's instant gratification, right? If we have no incentive to watch a game, the human will just not watch anymore. Like, give me something that's going to benefit me is how the human thinks now. And if there's no benefit to this game, like you're just purely a fan and just want to watch it, like that only works when your team's in the playoff. But an actual like regular season Miami Heat versus Detroit Pistons, you're not watching unless you have money on the game. I'll just be honest. That's not how this world works anymore.
It's not. No, it's really not. And look, these things happen. You roll with the punches, and then you come back and you do it again the following week. Yep. That's what it is. And you're going to have some wild performances. Like yesterday, Aaron Rodgers, 47 fantasy points. Matthew Stafford was second at his position. Kirk Cousins was third. Brissett was fourth. Lamar Jackson was fifth. Jared Goff was down there at sixth. How about the other game with Kyler Murray and Daniel Jones, right? Daniel Jones all the way down here. I'll do you one better. Kyler Murray had less fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes, and the same basically as Matt Schaub. So it's crazy, right? These things happen.
But supposedly best matchups on the board, right? Highest total games, highest everything. Yeah. Matt Ryan, another one. I mean,
it happens. Daniel Jones, 13 fantasy points. Sometimes, teams will run, and look what happens. Matt Ryan, even before the injury, was having a terrible game. Let's look at running back. Chase Edmonds, Manny, and Latavius Murray. Like you said, the optimal backup. The two backup running backs finished first and second in fantasy scoring at their position yesterday. How about that?
RBs don't matter, baby. I mean, listen, Kamara matters a ton, but I mean, we briefly talked about it yesterday too. I'm in the camp that running backs don't matter. I mean, an 11-on-11 game, you can't tell me one person is going to make a huge difference. We saw that again yesterday, man. Two backups having pretty big time days.
Yeah, and one more thing while we're at it, you and I have gotten into this a lot. Should Anthony Lynn be held responsible, head coach of the Chargers, for bringing Melvin Gordon back in a capacity that wiped Austin Eckler off the board for large stretches of games? And then we see yesterday, they should have won that game, by the way. Melvin Gordon fumbled at the goal line after being stuffed before and having a touchdown overturned, as it should have been overturned. Fumbles at the goal line, has a miserable game. And Austin Eckler was the reason that they were back in contention. This is really a point where de-emphasizing Austin Eckler because Melvin Gordon returned is one of the worst mistakes a coach could have made. And I think he's learned from that mistake. We saw that yesterday.
Yeah, a team that, offensively looked pretty good to start the season, I'd say, right? Now they've lost back-to-back games to Denver, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee. Come on, bro. A team that has or had, because I can't imagine they still have playoff aspirations unless they just run the table the rest of the way. But yeah, those are 3 brutal losses. They had losses to Detroit and Houston early on. Their only wins this season, week 1 against Indy, and then week 4 against Miami, which everyone beats Miami. So that's, man, you can't get any worse. To me, it's, why are you stopping your use of Eckler? Like, you only came back in this game too because Eckler had a monster fourth quarter. If it wasn't for Eckler,
right, absolutely,
you probably don't even come back in this game either. So
top wide receivers: Marvin Jones, number 1; Zach Pascal, number 2; Hopkins and Thomas, 3 and 4; Allen Robinson, number 5. Garbage time, big time garbage time production. Had a decent game up until that. Alex Erickson, number 6. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who didn't practice for 4 straight days, number 7. Danny Amendola, number 8. Corey Davis, number 10. How about that, man?
Yeah, no, I mean, you did not project anything up there outside of DeAndre, Michael Thomas, maybe Allen Robinson. Everything else, you're a liar.
All right. And then tight end, Darren Waller, Eric Ebron, and Kyle Rudolph, man. He 2 and 3.
Remember those years? I was alive when those guys were good back in the day.
And we got to the defense. Hey, first of all, if you guys haven't done so yet and you enjoy the show, you want to help support us, hit us with that thumbs up, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well so we can continue to put out free content here on YouTube and continue doing what we all love to do, talking daily fantasy sports. Before we head out, Manny, tell them where they can find you. And any last words for this week 7 recap? Looking forward to week 8.
Yeah, so I think listen, if you were bold enough to be different in tournaments this week, you had a good week. I think weeks like this should always teach us something, and I think for this week we should take away that being different can go a really long way in tournaments. We saw some guys have massive days, just even going slightly away from the field. So just keep that into account when you're making lineups for any sport, really. And again, I'll talk about this more in depth on my Twitch streams, twitch.tv/mlore. You can find all my work and videos on Fantasy Cruncher, fantasycruncher.com. You guys use the add-on. And then nothing, that's it. And the NBA starts today. I'll do that right after the show.
One more thing. JJ Standing said in chat, and I want you to respond to this. He said, so in other words, talking about, what were the top players here, there's no way Fantasy Cruncher could have come up with the winning lineup. When you're crunching just by projections in Fantasy Cruncher, no, but you don't want to just crunch by fantasy projections, right? There's a lot of things. There's a lot of different variables that go into it, Manny. So do I think it would have ever come up with, no matter what you do, like Zach Pascal and Amendola and Marvin Jones all in the same lineup? No, but you didn't need all of those guys to win. So I don't know. It's not, if you're crunching by strictly projections, then of course not, but that's not exactly what we're doing.
Right. The Fantasy Cruncher doesn't like him, so he didn't give it to him yesterday, right? No, FC doesn't have a brain. It's a software that spits out what you put in, right? So if you didn't put in the settings to be able to get something like that, then of course you won't get anything like that. But I kind of despise when people say it doesn't give you anything. It's not a human. It is a software, and it spits back out what you put in. So let's work on our settings a little bit, see how we can be a little bit more contrarian for next week. And then hopefully we can get stacks that are pretty low owned with some decent fillers around them and aim for that 1%.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us all the time, every time. And of course, if you're sticking around and you're playing some NFL tonight, we've got the live before lock coming up with Nolan and EMAC. They're going to take you up to a lock for this. stellar and enthralling Patriots-Jets matchup. Should be exciting. Jake Hari with the NHL Strategy Show at 4 p.m. And tomorrow, man, NBA is back. NBA is back tomorrow. Only a couple games, a bit of a teaser, but the season is literally right here, and I can't wait. So we're going to have a ton of content. I'm going to be doing NBA shows, of course, and a ton of NBA content on the site. Stick with us, awesemo.com and youtube.com/awesemo for everything coming down the pike in the next couple days and weeks. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show. I'll be with Sal Vetri, and we'll be taking a first look at Week 8.